Okay, so we will, it's 6:02, and we'll call the October regular meeting of the Norfolk Board of Education to order. First on our agenda is public comments. I'd like to give a brief statement for public comment saying that Norfolk Board of Education welcomes all public comments. Very happy to have people come and participate. We ask that all comments be limited to 5 minutes or less. And please know that it is our policy that we don't respond immediately to comment, but that when appropriate, the administration or the board will get back to anyone who has a question or needs follow-up. So we have a member of the public. Would you like to speak, public member?
I yield my time.
Do we have any digital or virtual members?
We do. Denise can hear. If you'd like to say anything.
If you'd like to say anything, please unmute. Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of September 7th. I assume everyone got a copy of the minutes in their packet.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the September 7th, 2021.
Okay, the motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
I am.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Moving on to correspondence. We did receive a letter that I'd like to share. I think I'm gonna actually read the whole letter into the record, or read it out for everyone to hear. This is from the superintendent of schools in for Region 7, Judy Plum. It's to Mary Beth, but I'll read it out. It says, "Dear Mary Beth, as you know, Northwestern High School has been designated a 2021 National Blue Ribbon School for exemplary high performance. This is an extraordinary achievement for a high school. We are very proud of our students for performing at such a high level. There is no doubt that with RSD 7 Board of Education support, our dedicated administrators, faculty, and staff have demonstrated excellence in their duties. It's also important for me to recognize that the Botel School has played an important role in our success. Norfolk students receive strong educational foundation that we build upon when they enter the region's school district number 7. I would like to acknowledge the hard work of Lauren Valentino, your faculty and staff in preparing your students for 7th grade. I would also like to express my appreciation to the Norfolk Board of Education for their work in providing your students with all they need to gain a strong educational foundation in their early years. Mary Beth, I would also like to recognize your leadership and the consistent effort you put into creating an excellent educational experience for your students. After many years in education, I know you are aware of the fact that it is truly a pre-K through 12 accomplishment. In closing, I would like to reiterate my appreciation for the educational foundation you have provided for our students. Your many efforts are deeply appreciated, and I look forward to working with you as we plan for the future. Sincerely, Judy." So I wanted to read that because it's such a nice letter, and it really is so very true. I mean, it's such a wonderfully, it's just a great award. It's really a lot to be proud of, and I think that all the feeder schools have a lot to be proud of for who, the great students that we put forward. And I feel really good about how well we work together with the high school and the middle school. I know that they really feel like we're partners, and I'm really proud of them and proud of all of us for doing it. Thank you, Judy. When I went to open house, I have the unusual moment right now in our family life of having a student in elementary school, middle school, and high school. So I went to 3 open houses in like a week. So I feel like I have a lot of basis on which to compare and contrast. But they talked a lot about this accomplishment and how proud they are of it. And that's great. And it's a very whole school kind of feeling and effort. So I love that, and I'm glad to be part of it.
We just had to college and
Yeah.
college be rated #1 in the state. I mean,
This is a fantastic place to live. People should move here.
right, absolutely.
And Regional 7 had a big video presentation that they showed everybody at the open houses.
It was great.
Oh, yeah. And they posted it on their social media.
But do you know how that was created? Because it was
They must have
beautifully
done
made.
something.
It must have been over
yeah,
time.
right.
They compile things
Right.
from various different things, because,
It was only a
Because-
couple days after.
yeah, I was like, man, they're good. It was not- And it was like, it was a slick presentation. It was really very good. It was very nice to put together. It's so funny you mentioned, because I was like, oh, did you do this? I was like, that's what I said to Jenny when I got home.
Just to know, there's only 325 schools across the nation from K through 12 designated as a liberty school. So, I mean, that's great.
That's great accomplishment. Okay. Moving on. Next we have our superintendent's report. Okay,
So-
see it in our packets.
Yeah, and I'll just elaborate a little bit. Right now, we are still at 0 cases of COVID in the school. We have not had any positive cases. Norfolk as a community has gone from the yellow, which is the lowest, or the safest, least number of cases, to the orange level, but we're still maybe like, represents maybe 2 or 3 cases in the town. The state as a whole is trending back towards orange and yellow, so Litchfield County is no longer red, so it bears well for us. In terms of the percentage of people who are vaccinated in Norfolk, we're lagging a little bit behind our neighboring towns, but again, you know, it appears that more and more people are getting vaccinated, so we're hopeful that we'll at some point get to either herd immunity or a place where we can start to talk about demasking and you know, having school look even more normal than it is now. But compared to last year, we're in a really good place. In terms of our staff, we have we're fully vaccinated with the exception of 4 people. 2 of them told me today that they are planning to get vaccinated, and so we're pretty good place here. Making progress. Yeah, and we've had total compliance with the executive order in terms of those people who cannot be vaccinated or choose not to be vaccinated, are complying with the weekly testing, and we will continue to do that at least until February 15th, when the executive order has been extended to. So we're doing well. Our kids are is wonderful as they have always been. Our families continue to be tremendously cooperative in terms of not sending kids sick to school, to keeping us posted about anything that we might be, you know, needing to know. So all is good on that count. We no longer have a facilities subcommittee, right? Right. So I just figured I'll give you a little bit of an update on that. So we have an issue with the stairs going down next to the hall flag, the lowest level. We've had someone out here twice to look at it. We're waiting for them to come back and give us a quote and a schedule of when they can do the repair. I'm hoping that it's sooner than later, because I think once it gets here, we run into temperature problems where they won't be able to necessarily do the work those things up.
You're talking about the outside stairs?
Yeah, but
So
from that area.
something is crumbled or something?
Yeah, huge chunk of came out. So there was a crack, and we hadn't noticed it, and as recently as the talent show, we were
Right,
all
it was
sitting there.
definitely not there.
So
at the
I'm
time.
thinking that something must have happened, which, you know, was just rather all the rain.
Reminds me of all the rain. Oh.
So, but that is cordoned off, and we're waiting, you know, we're just waiting for the man to come back. The first time he came, no one was around, and he told our custodians that he looked around, but he didn't know what stairs we were talking about. So they put big signs and cones and you know, whatnot. So he came back, but we have not yet heard about that. Also, we saw that a number of lights were out at the top parking lot. I don't know if any of you noticed that, but Matt's going to get in contact with Eversource, because I believe that the lighting is there for you. And then, the gym lights, we're still waiting for a quote. We did talk to the folks, and they said there's no problem getting the whatever illumination that was recommended. 3, is that the next
Oh,
one?
3,000 degrees Celsius.
Okay, so that's not a problem, but we don't have the quote yet. I think Lauren asked about extending the lighting to the stage area, but, Leo has said that there's some issue with asbestos, so we need to tread very softly with before we go mess with anything. So right now, that's not, on the table. We are not in a position to open that can of worms yet, but that's where we are. Facilities, still no word on the big green slide, other than, I don't know where it came from, but someone said it's been there all along. I never saw it. There's a great big green tube in the covered playground. Do you know if they moved that yet, Lauren?
I don't know. When you guys were here cleaning out, it was there.
It was there, yeah, but since then, you mean today?
No, you guys were there last weekend,
Yes,
right?
it was definitely
Yeah, I'm sure it's still
This,
there.
this recent one?
Yes.
So I'll ask you again tomorrow if you see him before I do.
Sure. I
To
definitely
move
will.
that out of there because, children being children, they thought it'd be very cool to crawl inside and roll around and so.
But
we
that's
had to-
super fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that.
So we will move that, and Matt said he would send somebody up to store it permanently until we figure out whether it's something that they can use when they rebuild the slide or whether we need to get rid of it. So that's where that is. We have a really wonderful presentation planned for you, so I'm not going to take up any more of your time with chatter unless you have questions that I can respond to. I'll turn it over to back over to you, Ian.
Okay, great. Let's keep us moving along, so we have the, like you said, in the kind of, reports. Okay, next on our agenda is the principal's report.
Okay. Well, as you may remember, September 14th, I believe, was the first day that our pre-K students started at Hotel, and their transition has gone very smoothly. They are with Mrs. Talon and the kindergarteners in our early primary class and enjoying every moment of it. Thanks to the PTO for the ice cream social. That was really a wonderful event and so nice to see our families in person. It was very well attended and enjoyed by all. So thank you very much for hosting us. Last time we talked about the 9/11 ceremony at the Norfolk Volunteer Fire Department. Thank you so much to the coaches who changed the soccer game time and for the parents who brought their kids. There had to be almost half of our school population there that day to sing. And it was a lovely ceremony and our presence was greatly appreciated by everyone who was there. Ms. Kleisner did a fantastic job preparing 3 songs and our students sounded beautifully. It was just a very moving experience and I'm glad that our kids had the invitation and opportunity to participate.
Yeah,
they were
thank you to
definitely-
all the, everybody who did that, beyond the time that they're, coming after hours and making it happen.
And I'm really appreciative that Mr. Cadwell reached out to us and invited us to participate. It was very moving. And I think that, all of us at one point or another were dabbing our eyes at it was very well put together and I was just pleased that our kids could be there and participate. We had open house, was it just last week? Maybe the week before. And that also was well attended. We had about 50% of our families in attendance. I'd like to follow up and just see if, is there anything that we can do differently so we can get a greater turnout? Childcare, food, offering a virtual option too, because that's such an important opportunity for our families to come in and hear about what their child's school experience is going to be like. And we were very pleased to have a good turnout for that event. And
Lauren, are you planning to do a survey or something to ask people?
yeah,
I'm curious to know if people would, some people love virtual options, some people hate them.
yes,
And, it'd be great if you could figure out a way to do like a hybrid thing. We could offer
Absolutely.
both. like that.
Or just even understand what are the barriers, you know, did we not, I mean, I feel like we communicated it well enough in advance. It was part of the summer mailing, you know, in my back to school newsletter, but maybe people don't read that, you know. Was it a fact of childcare and just poor time? So if we know
It is,
what the
I mean-
barriers were, then maybe we can, you know,
Yeah.
adjust.
Yeah, it is tricky, I think, for people that, you know, people with elementary school kids have elementary school kids to care for at that time. So
Yes,
I think that probably is a barrier. I know in the past that PTO has offered like to host kids in the gym or something like that, but for school.
Yes.
Sure, we like to do
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
And I think some families, although you were very, I thought you were clear about your time slots and everything, I think some people were kind of confused.
Yeah.
And like that open time in the gym was awesome. But I
Mhm.
think, like, I met a lot of families, because we were afterwards in this couple gym, a lot of families came in later because they were not aware
Yeah.
of that open
Mhm.
time with you. and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So, that's hard to.
And we,
Express.
yeah, it is. And before we positioned that gathering time at the beginning, but then for the folks who have a 7:20 presentation, that's a long time to hang around. So I think we have it positioned right. Maybe it's communicating it more clearly about what that is and why you should come.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because I did find that, I mean, maybe just because I've been to the open houses a lot, but I thought that metal part was really good. I liked that part a lot.
Good. Thank you. So, and then the last thing that I wanted to mention as far as updates was we had our good news gathering, the first one of the school year, where everyone was socially distanced and we were all in the same space, which was lovely because we couldn't do that last year. And at that good news gathering, we launched a reboot of SOAR as well as our school charter, which is one of the ruler tools for our social emotional learning program. And so we got feedback from parents at the open house and through the newsletter about how they wanted their children to feel at school. And each year we, classroom teachers create classroom charters. And so we used the feeling words from there. And right before the closure, we had started making a school charter. So we got previous feedback in 2020. I guess, about how kids wanted to feel at school. And we combined all of those to come up with happy, safe, excited, confident, welcomed and loved. So that's how our children and our parents want their kids to feel at school. And from there, we launched into a reboot of SOAR. If this is how we want to feel at school, we're going to SOAR to do that. And so we redesigned SOAR to have, to accomplish a couple of things. Some of the language was a little difficult to teach to younger students. Some of the expectations were repetitive, like offer kindness and respect others. And we wanted to have an academic flair to it because that's what we're about too. So SOAR now stands for show self-control, offer kindness and respect, achieve our goals, and are ready to learn. So I wanted to make you aware of that change because that language and all of the expectations are being taught to our students. And then we have those upcoming events as listed on the report I shared with you, as well as our enrollment at 70 students as of the 1st of October. Does anyone have any questions for me about any of the upcoming events or anything that I shared? Okay. Are we going to do a presentation right now? Okay.
I have PowerPoint open. Okay, it's on there, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you mind passing this around to everybody?
I want to introduce Miss Shiloh Garceau. She is our math specialist. and Mrs. Ancilla was here in spirit. She unfortunately had a conflict. So Ms. Garceau and I are going to present our academic performance summary to you. I am going to begin, and I just wanted to give you this quick overview so you know what we're going to talk about tonight. And hopefully you can refer to it, ask any questions as we go through things. And I will get us started with just I'm going to give you a brief overview of our, how we assess student learning at Hotel as well as growth. Then before I talk about the Smarter Balance results from 2021, I want to just give you a brief overview of what Smarter Balance was all about in the previous years. And then we're going to talk about how our students performed on the Smarter Balance assessment. Ms. Garceau is going to come in on the math portion of that and then continue providing some information about the STAR assessment, which is another standardized measure that we give at Hotel. Then we're going to talk about what now? What are we going to do based on this information? And what are the next steps we're going to take? So that's where we're headed. And I think I'm already. So we assess student learning in a wide variety of manners, from informal observation assessments to more informal formative assessments at the lesson level. Little, checks and answers, exit tickets at the end of a lesson, to end of unit assessments, pre-assessments. We don't over-assess our kids. We are very strategic, but we want to make sure that our teaching is bearing fruit. And so in order to plan for the next day's instruction or the next unit's instruction, we use the data that we collect about how our students are growing and performing to respond. Part of that assessment system are the standardized measures we're going to talk about tonight, but those are a part of them. And my goal next year is to be able to present a more full body of evidence of how our students are learning, because as you know, the Smarter Balance is one important measure about how our students are learning and growing, but it is not the only measure. So here's a little bit of information about the background of Smarter Balance, the purposes, and the intentions. So as you probably are aware, the Smarter Balance assessment is aligned to the Common Core standards, which are standards that we teach to every day in school. It's administered between March and June to all students in grades 3 through 8. It's designed to be a global measure of student learning about those standards in that grade level. And it was created with input from educators. It's an accountability measure to make sure that education is equitable among our schools. And as you know, it's a legal requirement. It was not legally required when we were all closed for COVID, but it was again last year a legal requirement. So it's intended to provide an accurate description of students' achievement and growth within that year. It's an annual snapshot, and it's designed to provide valid, reliable, fair results on how students are learning. It's not intended to be the sole measure of how we're achieving as a school or the sole source of guidance for our curriculum and the revisions. And it's not to be used as the only measure from those other previous ones I talked about that we use at the time. So then COVID hit. So why, some of you might be asking, why would we test in the middle of a global pandemic? We also asked that, but I think it was really a smart idea in the end to do that, because this is going to tell us a bunch of things. How did COVID impact not only our students, but students across the state and nationally? It's going to provide us a new baseline from which to grow and help our students achieve. There were no school accountability measures this year with the Smarter Balance assessment, which means that we have no state comparison data and no regional comparison data. And that was really done on purpose, because the purpose of the test was not to compare how learning went between student to student, because as you can imagine, student learning across the state looked very different. We were very fortunate to be in person. That is not true for other districts. And to compare different modes of learning for students was inequitable. So it really is truly a new baseline from which we're all, planning and responding to. So here are some big takeaways of what we do know about the results. So while we don't have comparative data, what we do know for sure is that student achievement was definitely impacted by the pandemic, as I'm sure you can common sense wise understand. In-person learners in general performed substantially better than students who were hybrid or remote, which is great news because 99% of our students were in person. Certainly last year, even though we were in person, there were bumps in the road. We had students home for quarantining. We had a couple of classes home for quarantining. By and large, our students benefited from a largely in-person model. However, even though in-person achievement was better than hybrid or remote, the data shows that in-person learners still did not grow at the rate and achieve at the rate of pre-pandemic levels. So we know that in general, the pandemic affected student achievement. And math, this is not true for us, but math typically was the area that was impacted by and large. The areas in ELA that were impacted, like writing and research, were true for Botel. But as you'll see in a moment, our math performance really was not negatively affected. So how did we perform? So I just want to review, here's what the Smarter Balance assesses in literacy. There's three main areas. It assesses a student's achievement in reading, writing and research, and listening. And it assesses kids' ability to analyze, compare, contrast, show evidence from sources, and integrate main ideas and understandings across all of those literacy domains. So with regards to Smarter Balance, I just have on this slide our whole school performance. And you can see that our trajectory pre-pandemic was going in the right direction. Here's where COVID hit, and this is where our students performed in literacy after the pandemic. So we had I would say, a slight dip in performance, and the areas where we were most impacted were really reading, were really writing, and research. And I'm going to talk about that next as our takeaways. Ms. Barceau is going to come up and talk about math and then tell you a little bit more about STAR.
So for SBA assesses math, communicating mathematical reasoning, demonstrating conceptual and procedural understanding, and applying math knowledge to solve real-world problems and analyze data. So we can see in the past, there's a nice steady increase here, and we dropped 2% after the pandemic hit right here, which I think is pretty awesome.
And I just want to say, it's more than pretty awesome. Across the state, the math scores plummeted. So the fact that we basically sustain is really significant.
For the STAR assessment, this is an assessment that is aligned to Connecticut core standards for reading and math. We administer this assessment 3 times a year to our K students. It takes between 10 and 30 minutes to administer. It's computer adaptive, so the questions become more or less challenging depending on how the students answer the question. So we really find exactly where each child is. This test is given to students across the nation so that it's normed, and we chose this. It's chosen by many districts as a valid and reliable assessment. The purposes and intentions of STAR to screen students to ensure adequate progress, to measure progress and growth over time, to identify skills learned and to make plans for next steps, to determine students who may need additional academic support in our SRBI program, and to analyze strengths and areas for growth with teaching and learning. Here's our student performance. So for literacy and reading in K6, we did good job. Board. For that pandemic. But still, 74% of our students are meeting or exceeding goal. For our math, came in the 50s here, 52% of our kiddos meeting or exceeding goal in our STAR math assessment. And the growth data, the student growth percentile compares the student's growth to his or her peers nationwide. On a scale from 1 to 99. So if a student has a SGP of 90, it means the growth from one test to another was better than 90% of students at a similar achievement level. So we use these percentiles to help answer the question of are our students meeting growth expectations? Can I read all?
No,
Any questions about that?
It's a very complex educational, whole thing, but basically what it means is that we have a number that tells us how well our kids grow. And typical growth is anywhere from 35 to 65, so that's like a year's worth of typical growth. What we're looking for is high growth, and that's 66 and above for an SGP, and you're gonna see how well our students are growing in general.
So for our STAR reading, percentage of students making typical to high growth, 74% this past year. Which is really close to where we want to see pandemic. And our math increased to 71%.
So, I think I can get started. So what do we do now? What does this tell us? I think the first thing that this tells us is that in the middle of a global pandemic, our teachers showed up every day with unprecedented situations that they had to respond to in real time. Our students showed up every day and worked their hardest. And our parents were right there with us, not only through the pandemic, sitting through geometry lessons, but as partners with us throughout this, so we could do what we needed to do to help our students succeed and grow. So when we think about the literacy data analysis, I think the pandemic somewhat impacted our performance. But by and large, the in-person learning model benefited our students immensely. Of note, which you can't see in the data because of how we presented it as school-wide data, our primary grade, our first and second grade students in reading were definitely affected by the school closure in the spring, and they came in at, with STAR scores that were below where they would typically be. By the end of the year, almost, I think 100% of our first graders were meeting or exceeding goal, and our second graders, I believe it's around 80%. So the gap that our primary teachers closed is really commendable, and I just have to make sure that I mention that. Based on the analysis of the Smarter Balance data and the STAR data, we've selected a couple of areas of focus. And one is a reading focus. We're really wanting our kids to be able to analyze text more deeply, use evidence from sources, compare and contrast, and understand the author's point of view. Those were areas that we want to focus on. And the writing and research strand, areas that came out were informational and opinion writing, but most specifically like revising some brief texts. So those are areas that we're going to pursue with instruction throughout our curriculum. The math data analysis, I think was clear. Our overall math achievement was less impacted by the pandemic. And I think that, you know, we really held our own, and we don't have any growth data for the Smarter Balance because we didn't take it the year before, but the STAR growth data really shows a nice trend line of consistent growth. One thing that we are very aware of in the analysis of our math data is that as the standards become more abstract, as the complexity increases, our kids are having, like there's a gap in performance. So we really, now with the second year of using this math resource, the help of our math specialist and collaboration between the classroom teachers and other areas I'm going to talk about, we really are going to target that. And we've identified an area of focus as communicating your mathematical reasoning, which I shared a little bit about at open house, but really what that means is that this math work requires our students to not just get the right answer, but to be able to have the flexibility and communication skills necessary to show how they know this to be true. So kids can use a variety of ways to communicate their reasoning, and we want to make sure we're teaching into that, because if they can explain their thinking, they can, demonstrate their accuracy more, they can catch any mistakes in their reasoning, and being able to explain something means that you're pretty much ready to teach it to somebody else, which is a true measure of learning. So the actions that we plan on taking this year, I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, I really would like to be able to provide you with a full scope of how we assess student learning, because these are two indicators, but we have a lot of other indicators that we use too. And so I am this year working with teachers to collect comprehensive data from throughout the school year in a variety of areas. And we use impact teams, which is a collaboration tool that teachers participate in to analyze the data and really make next step instructional moves. We're focusing on descriptive, actionable feedback. And I know you've heard me talk previously about how we were supporting our students in peer and self-reflection with a framework we call Glow and Grow. Which is really noticing the strengths of your work and noticing where you need to improve. But we also really want to elevate the feedback that we give as teachers, so kids know how to use it. So they can actually say, oh, you're telling me this. I need to do this differently or better to be able to improve my work. So one of the ways that we're planning on doing that is through a unit assessment feedback tool that's going to be aligned to the progress reports. So we can share with kids at the end of a unit of study, here's what you definitely know. And we can then use that same feedback tool with parents. So they have a very clear through line of how their child is growing and progressing over time. We're going to continue to utilize collaborative planning with our instructional coaches, Ms. Garceau and Mrs. Ancillo. That collaboration is critical to, our students and teachers' success. Unpacking the standards, developing clear learning targets and success criteria when you have a path that you've laid out and you've unpacked the resources to be able to teach them. That's a huge benefit. We've also increased instructional time in grades 3 through 6 for math, with the addition of what we're calling win time. And win stands for what I need. Basically, when teachers collect evidence of student learning from the days before math lesson, we're using win time to differentiate instruction. So if Anne completed the day's lesson and achieved at a very high level, that teacher is looking at her work and saying, great, during wind time, Anne is going to have this enrichment activity that's going to take her to the next level. Conversely, if John showed that he had some misunderstandings on a concept, he can work with the teacher to, clear up, and the teacher can do some reteaching. So that win time really is designed to be responsive in real time to what students need based on evidence of learning from the previous lesson. And that's about 30 minutes every day. And lastly, like I mentioned, one of our school goals this year is communicating reasoning, and we're going to use writing about reading as a high leverage point to improve our students' ability to analyze text and write well, as well as the other things that we do in reading and writing. But that's a focus. And in K through 6, later this week, we're going to work on a communicating reasoning progression. So again, it kind of goes back to that success criteria that I talked about right here. When we know what communicating reasoning looks like in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, we can build a continuum of skills and instruction so our students are well equipped to share what they've learned and make sense of math in a way that helps not only them show what they know, but really helps their classmates learn from them. So those are our actions for this year. I believe that's the end. I'm sure you're very happy. Last slide. So the last slide is we're gonna obviously we're gonna check in and monitor and evaluate these actions. This is how we're going to do it by impact teams, learning walks, the evaluation model, and artifacts that we collect throughout the year. So we're going to be measuring the outcomes of these actions to make sure that they're having the desired impact. And if we need to make changes along the way, we will. So questions that I can answer or Ms. Garceau can answer for you.
That was really good. Excellent. Very good. Very good.
Okay.
I do have a couple questions.
Okay, I hope I will try to answer them.
Well, first of all, can you just explain again what a learning walk is?
Yes, okay, I need to be up there. So a learning walk, we're actually going on one tomorrow. And what it is it's a team of educators who have a focus of inquiry. So tomorrow's focus of inquiry is to what extent are students partners in the formative assessment cycle. Now that's a lot of educational jargon. And what that basically means is, you know what I'm talking
Yeah, I
about.
do. I'm fine.
Well, it's funny. I did this presentation for my husband. He goes, do they know any of this stuff? Because this is all that. So anyway, I said, yes, I think they do. But a learning walk is where a team of educators go and collect evidence about a focus of inquiry. So the formative assessment process is basically what we've been chasing after for many years because it's a high leverage impact. It has a high leverage of impact on student learning. And it boils down to this. Do students know what they're learning? Not just what they're doing. Do they know what they're learning? Do they know what they need to do to be successful? That's that success criteria. Do they get feedback from their teacher or peers to improve their learning? And then do they know what to do with that feedback to in fact improve their learning? So the formative assessment partnership between students is designed to make them active consumers of their learning rather than passive recipients of kids who just churn out work. Does that make sense? So a learning walk is basically going around and looking for evidence of how well our students are doing. So we, tomorrow, we're going to go into classrooms and we're going to ask a bunch of questions like, what are you learning today? How do you know you'll be successful at it? What kind of feedback have you gotten? And I can share at some point, I don't have it with me, our students' growth over the years with this. The fall is always a little iffy because kids are just starting school and, you know, sometimes they'll be like, and then we'll say, that's okay. But really the outcome of that is to help us evaluate where our kids' strengths are and why, and where our kids need to go, and what practices are we gonna put in place to help them get there. Because we know that kids are not just going to, you know, walk into a math lesson and be able to say, oh, today I'm learning about shapes, unless there's some orchestration happening with a teacher. Because kids come in and they're like, okay, what am I doing today? You know, they don't make that connection. So basically, learning walks help us improve teaching and learning by looking at what our kids are currently doing, what we want them to do, and then what do we do as educators to make that happen.
Who goes on a learning walk? It's you.
Everyone.
Somebody, oh, all-
Everybody.
So who's teaching the classes when everybody's off?
Well, everybody takes turns.
Oh, okay.
So tomorrow, and that's one of the things that we've changed, because PDEC, our Professional Development and Evaluation Committee, traditionally has been the group of educators who have gone on all of the walks. And then we started inviting teachers to some of the walks, because we found that to be incredibly, an incredible learning experience. And the feedback last year from PDEC was, we need all of the teachers to go on all of these walks, because the amount of learning that we have had based on these learning walks has been immense. And everybody needs to have this experience. So tomorrow, for the first time at the beginning of the year, everybody is going to have an opportunity to ask these questions of our students. And then on our early release day, everybody is going to analyze the data together and determine what is this saying about where we are and where our kids are, and what are we going to do next about it. So you tell me, I'm excited about this. But that's what a learning walk is. And the question might change based on what we're looking for. I'm in the middle of the year. I'm anticipating one of the questions we're going to attempt to answer is, you know, how well are our students communicating their reasoning? Because again, we try to connect it to our goals, so we have a way to monitor it and then evaluate our success.
And so, my other question was about the STAR assessments. I know you said you do them 3 times a year, right?
Yes.
And you said other areas, they're normalized because there's lots of other people who would also do STAR assessments.
Yes.
Do you ever compare your STAR assessments with other people in the area, or are they just like an in-school thing? Where you
It's just
compare
an-
it to how you did previously?
Yeah, that's what it is. We don't have, you know, how we can kind of compare the Smarter Balance results, you know, regionally and across the state. There are a couple of other schools. Heartland School does the STAR, but the data does not come back to you like that because it's a nationwide test. It's really our students compared to their peers across the nation. And it's the achievement scores are calculated based on what they know a student, you know, how well a student should perform. But the growth data is really what they use in compare, you know, you set a goal based on what kids typically would achieve if they, you know, say they scored an 8 on the test, and, you know, there are 100,000 other kids who scored an 8, and based on previous experience with how well kids grow, they'll say a good goal is a 12. And kids will either meet that goal, they'll exceed that goal, and that's how that SGP, the growth score, is calculated. But we don't get the data like that. It's really just our students' performance and growth over time, not compared to any other school in the region or place in the nation.
I'm not surprised it was Heartland School.
Do you usually use the STAR assessments to make changes on a per student basis or like on a classroom basis?
I think both. Yep. We get an instructional plan. One of the reports that we can generate is an instructional plan that looks at, you know, each student's performance in the class, and it will set a growth target, and it will also identify particular skills that are either within the grade level, above the grade level, below the grade level, depending on how the child performed. We always use that data with other data before we make a decision, because there are some kids who just, they don't do well in those kind of assessments. They're either disengaged or, stressed. The star is timed where the smarter balance is not. And so there are certainly other factors that can impact a student's performance other than their ability. And so that's why, again, I keep talking about having a body of evidence. And we always, if we look at somebody's results and we're like, that matches what we know about that child, then we use it along with that other data to proceed along a path. But if that we get some data back on the STAR assessment, and we're like, that doesn't really match what we know about that child, we follow up with some diagnostic assessments and compare that results. And so we really use that as a way to monitor progress, but we always use that in concert with other data to confirm or dispute the results, because it could take a student, we've had kids finish in 2 minutes. But you can imagine the student who finishes in 2 minutes doesn't do as well as the student who finishes in 22 minutes or 32 minutes. So.
I have one more question.
Sure.
With the SBAC test, you had said that this year will be used to set a baseline by which previous or next year's
Yes.
future results will be kind of judged against that. So does it hurt us to have performed well? Like,
No,
okay.
I think what it says is that, we held our own in the middle of unprecedented times, and everything that we've been doing and everything we're going to continue to do are just going to help our kids continue to grow. So, no, I think what it
Stay tuned for next year, because it really puts us in a, position that we're not like to. Just wanted to continue to do what we've been doing and build on what they know they're starting here. They're going to go much further than if they were starting at a deficit. Absolutely. And just a little plug, this board has advocated, supported, even through difficult budget times, for, math resource and literacy resource teachers. And they have been instrumental in not only providing support for kids, but for teachers. And especially in the spring when we had to transition to remote learning. And then last year coming back and determining where kids were relative to their experiences, because from March to June, some kids were there every day with an adult supervising, other kids not so much. So we had, quite a bit of disparity and a lot of gaps to fill. And with the help of our resource teachers, working with our teachers to identify where the kids were, that's what enabled us, especially in this primary grades, to close the gaps the way they did. So kudos, thank you to you.
And identifying those gaps.
Well, that's great. It's good to hear that all those pieces are falling into place. Does anybody else have any questions about that presentation? Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. That was a lot. That's really good, very complete.
Very well done.
Okay, and was there anything else you wanted to talk about in your principal's report, or? No, we're all. Okay. Then we'll move on to our standing committee. So, first on that list is the curriculum and technology committee meeting that we did hold the other day, and I thought that went well. We highlights we can share from that. A little fuzzy. Let's see.
Rachel and Shad.
Yeah. Oh, so we talked about how technology is holding strong. We had replaced them, or replaced some pieces. We're continuing to use those platforms as organizing spaces, and that they're very efficient. The kids are still doing well with them.
We'll have the Chromebooks, they're all updated, there's no more outdated Chromebooks. Go Guardian's working well to monitor what the kids are accessing on the internet, which my child could attest to because he can't look up certain things on Google that he really, really wants to.
It's really frustrating.
Yeah, reading math, reading over.
So things were going smoothly and everybody was on track.
Yeah, and the
I think
teams.
Charlie wanted to add something.
I think that was, we said that we were talking more about the data
Right, that's
tonight,
right.
so we
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
dive
that's
into
the
data
discussion. Right,
last week.
okay, great.
And you probably talked a little bit about some of the action steps that I just talked about.
Yes, we did.
John, did you want to put anything from the finance?
Finance committee not met, but we look forward to.
Comes faster than it seems like it should. Policy has a lot to say.
Policy has a lot to say. We met earlier this afternoon, and we have two things. One, which was in your packet, is the tuition fee policy that we had our first reading on back in, I think it was June. Yes, June. So this, is here for a second reading tonight and to adopt. If everyone, before any further adjustments needed. And then the larger first reading, which getting, I'll pass around now, is our updated COVID policy based on the updated mandates from the state. We have taken what Kate has recommended and adapted it to for our district, for our school. And this is as I said, it's a first reading. There's the red and the blue are changes in
that are relatively new, yeah. Things like the
Oh,
vaccine and all of that are. There are some nuances that are different. A year ago, you did vote on a policy. It was a one-year policy that supported the mandates relative to COVID for that year, but it had a shelf life. Our attorneys have gone through all of this. The red and the blue are largely their recommendations to consider and tune in on. But the language throughout, as Jill said, is aligned with the executive order and the recommendations from CDC and the State Department, Department of Health and State Department of Education.
So the things in yellow will be the ideas that they've removed
So
or changed.
there's only one that I put an X because I don't think is relevant to us, but it's confusing because policy met today. So there are a lot of blue yellow things that were things that we caught, language, vocabulary change, punctuation. As John noted, that it typically throughout talks about the school, and we're only one school. I don't know if I caught them all, but we will go through and do a very careful but we basically wanted, we just got this finished last week and wanted you to read it for content to be sure that there were no issues or concerns, relative to the content. And once there's agreement there, we will go through with a fine tooth comb and make sure that we get all of the, spelling, punctuation, mechanical errors, spacing, and that type of thing cleaned up.
So this is the first reading, so we'll have the second reading in November.
And I don't believe we can vote on it without a second reading, so it really isn't, there's a somewhat of an urgent nature to have it in place, but I don't think that any of us can be waiting for the November to vote on it. It'll be a special.
I would just last meeting.
It will, yes, so my goal would be to get this
Yeah, we'll call this the Jill Hall policy, memorial policy. Operations.
And I'm not
Very
very
thick policy.
Yeah,
Should be
yeah.
judged on its lengthy content, yes.
And I know people are really, really busy, but as I mentioned in my report, next month will be the last time that this board convenes as a board. It will change after that. So I didn't know if we wanted to maybe, come a half hour earlier, we can take care of ordering some sandwiches or
I thought we
something.
were supposed to have pizza, like.
Well, Sally was gonna bring pizza, but we could. We could do
Waiting for my
something.
Whatever you want. I would love to do something to celebrate. Jill has been a member for a very long time.
Yes, yeah.
Very good movie for that.
And the conscientious and hard working.
That's for sure.
So if there's some concerns about what you would like to look like, I can collaborate with Sally.
And you want to start in a half hour early?
Well, I'm just saying, if, we would want to come and have some pizza and a little visit time before we start the meeting, so that we're not like, eating in public or, I mean.
You don't want to eat on video.
I'm I think not. So it was just a suggestion, but,
You and I coordinate,
be happy to get
together, and I think the best pizza comes out of Torrington, Marzano's.
That's a truck.
Yeah, but I don't think they'll need the truck.
Is everyone comfortable with maybe starting at 5:30, coming a little bit early, or what's your pleasure?
Down by me.
The works for you.
We'll send out the agenda with it'll be the 6 o'clock meeting time, but we'll just know that we're gonna come at 5:30.
So
Is
when's
that-
the election, the second? Second, it's early, it's awfully early this year.
The first Tuesday. Okay. After the first.
Right, which is early.
So is that also on board?
The next
No,
week is
No,
our
we
board
didn't-
meeting.
oh, 'cause it's a-
And then between the November meeting and our December meeting, Bill's replacement, any changes would have to go through the process downtown, and then any new members would be at the December meeting. And at that point, that's the meeting where the superintendent opens the meeting and it begins with an election of officers. So we need to be thinking about that. And then as soon as we have the election of officers, the new chair immediately takes over. Or the same chair, but it's really, really.
All right, so for our, back to our policy committee discussion, it'd be good for us to vote on the tuition line. So we have a tuition, do we have any tuition-based children now? We do, yes.
We do. So, the board had approved that we would, this basically, this language before it was put into policy. So we have one student who is currently a kindergartner who is paying the same rate that we charge preschoolers. So we have one.
And reasons to not allow a tuition student would be based on the makeup of the classroom or.
Well, there are many, many issues to consider. The attorneys don't recommend that we do this, largely because if you open up to anybody to come on a tuition basis, you can certainly put the language that says class size might, come into picture if we didn't have enough room.
Right.
But a couple things. So if you get children who come in and there's a large expense that comes with that child, or a lot of behavioral issues, you run into some issues when you decide, oh, no, we really don't want this child, because then you put yourself at risk for legal issues. And if you get a tremendous number of kids in, we certainly could say no, this class size, but at some point, if you have more kids, then at what point do you have to now hire a new teacher? And the tuition isn't going to cover the cost of the teacher. So there are just many things. I know you had an ad hoc committee that was looking into that, and they may have more to report about the findings, but
Well, I'm just, as a way to bring more students to our school, tuition is a pathway to get people who are non-residents to be able to come. But as I'm reading this, it looks as though our policy, we want to make sure that it gives us puts us in a position where we are not bound to take students if it will negatively impact the school and so on. But is there a place where that criteria is listed, or is that what you're saying is not legally advised?
Yeah, you would want to. So right now, the only new language in the policy is to allow staff members' children to attend at the same rate that we charge the preschool tuition or the tuition for over preschool. If the board wanted to continue to think about offering open enrollment or tuition, phase, then we would have to definitely change and then look at the language to check the board and to give the board the autonomy to control to the extent possible, what the circumstances under which we would, like some districts will put in the policy that any tuition paying parent would assume all costs of special education should that child.
Which is what this says, transportation and special education costs will be used by parents.
So, any additional language around that, we would, want to put in, because you want to have really clear criteria so that you're not accused of being discriminatory.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
So you just want really careful language, it's a lot more comprehensive than what we have here.
So I can imagine that during the last couple of years, during the COVID time, that it's a particularly difficult time maybe to accept new students, or I'm just wondering, like, what, if someone were to come to us right now and say, I'd like to enroll my child and I'll pay tuition, we would say, yes, right? Or only if it-
It would come to the board, we don't have a policy other than staff members, children who aren't residents, so we don't have that covered.
But we don't have a policy for allowing tuition-based kids at all.
I thought that's
Yeah,
what we
we
do.
do.
Remember,
We do.
2013. And I've known many preschoolers, especially
So
preschoolers.
it covers preschool. But the policy in the practice prior to that was only preschool. So the new language that was added was to
Just for employees.
employees.
Oh, so it's preschool only and plus employees. of any
Right.
grade.
And that's the
Yeah,
language.
we should change
added.
that to be
Yes.
all grades.
And then the, because I have that.
Week 6.
Well, I think the thing is with the tuition.
Because
Because
we had the tuition rate set at like 19,000.
Right.
Right.
But that was for pre-K only? I thought
No,
that was-
no, that was for
Pre-K is
not-
2,000, and then every year, like you will do tonight, you set a tuition rate, and I believe last year was like $19,000. So out of town people, when they inquire, we say we consider, but they say, no, we're not paying $19,000.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, so tuition was possible, it was just high.
That's
Right.
correct.
I see.
And we modified that for employees, that they wouldn't be charged the tuition rate that was set by the board, they would only be charged the tuition rate that we charge preschool.
I see. Okay.
Okay?
But that was
Thank
the
you.
exception.
Right. I did have last year, I did some research on formal.
Right, yeah. Before the growth part, we were doing
I was
it.
gonna say, actually, I think it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was right before COVID.
Yeah.
It's funny.
And I still have that.
Right, okay, yeah. I would love to revisit that. I mean, as things calm down now, we can
I
kind of go
do
back
too.
to all those great plans we had in February of that year, 2020. Yeah. 'cause-
And then other things you would have to consider is what, like, right now, there's been a value around class size. So you need to talk about, like, what would that number be before we would cut them off? So our class size gonna be, we want to cap it at 15 or 20 or 25? And at what point, would we want, it would be not viable to have only one teacher at grade level for.
Would you know how many children were in the
Well, she'll probably be 30.
38.
Well, we can probably go larger than like 7.
Yeah.
So I feel like we got some room. Okay,
38, can you imagine?
well, I would love to put that back on our agenda sometime.
I would too, I agree.
Okay, so keep kind of wandering away, I'm sorry, but our point is we need to vote on this tuition policy. The changes to this tuition policy. Does anyone want to make a motion that we accept these revisions?
I'll make a second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, motion carries. And then we will take this one home and carefully read it. Was there anything else from policy that you'd like to? Health and wellness, do you guys meet today?
Yeah, we met today. Because we didn't meet, it was so early in September, right? And we didn't meet. We had a nice kind of short meeting. We talked about the current status of the health and wellness policy that we worked on very hard. And Mary Beth was sent to the state, we're just waiting for feedback from them, if we have to make any changes, but other than that. So we went through COVID updates again, and Brooklyn Memorial is gonna come out in November to start their educational programs, and we'll be securing a date for those educational components. Paperwork and consent forms will be sent out to families, so they can return them, and then they can set up dates for cleanings and sealings. So, which is great, because they haven't been here in 2 years now to do those services, so we know how important mental health is to.
Have they been well used in the past, those corporate dental? appointments?
We have not, so the first year that we implemented it, it was just a screening, and then they could follow up at one of the clinics.
Okay.
Now, I believe the difference in the program is they're going to, do the screenings, but then also they're doing the work here at school. So this is a really nice opportunity for our kids to have, some dental care right in the building.
Great. All right.
So this is the first. We'll keep you updated on how it goes.
Okay, great.
But it was well received by parents.
Yes.
So that's pretty much, it was a nice short.
This is the first for,
This is the first for the Brooklyn Memorial coming here
right,
to do
Because we've certainly-
dental treatments. We
Right.
had them come before for educational and screening.
but we've also done that many years ago.
Yeah.
It wasn't that, yeah. We certainly had that done. We had dental from those.
Oh,
How is that?
Absolutely.
The Brooklyn Memorial stuff.
it's a grant.
Okay, is there anything else from the health and wellness committee? No, nothing. That was it. We've had some more meetings. For the communications committee meeting, I'm going to bring this on my communications committee members. I actually sent a little first draft of a brochure around, I emailed it to you guys, and I printed one, although it doesn't look super fantastic, but we will push out and I'll send that one around too. Well, the colors, it doesn't matter, but anyway, this is just kind of a first idea to go through, to just kind of get started. And what I'd like to do, in this case, I used stock photos, but I'd like to replace them with real children photos. But just wanted to start somewhere and then figure out how to post the kids. But in it, I made a little hotel crest. And I'm kind of curious to hear what people feel about this, because I sat looking at a blank computer screen for a very long time, thinking about what makes private schools look so appealing. They all have a crest.
Even regional has this bad. I mean, my kids, we drive up, they're like, we're going to Hogwarts. And it's
Right?
like, it's just as sad. Like, it's not really.
And I really like the idea. I put the eagle on it. It needs a little more fine tuning because I have to admit I was rushing through it this afternoon, but it's got little feather quills as the laurel next to it, which I thought, oh, that's a good idea. So I don't know if we like that, but I'm kind of tickled by this idea.
Right, and had a little like retro flair, so then we were at hotel, you know, years ago. Basketball, yeah, basketball jersey said BES on them.
Right,
and they
that's
had
right.
The little, so.
And they had the eagle on it, actually.
Because there's NW, you know, NWR is what they call Northwestern, so we're gonna keep working on building our ties. to that.
So BES, that's elementary school.
Right, that's the one. Yes. I almost spelled correctly, maybe that's not the best thing. to do.
I like that it looks a little Gryffindorish, you know? I think if you get the colors. No, and I like the points that you make about the programs and opportunities and included the new source stuff in there. So,
Yeah, so I think it doesn't have to have a lot of information. It doesn't have a lot of information. Typos.
She's got elementary equipment.
Point well taken.
Marketing people
Who
know you
handed
always
it to
put that
the
guy.
You always, you leave a mistake in there so that people notice it and they remember.
There you go.
Like, remember, they didn't spell elementary. correctly.
I don't know, so an early draft, but like at least some movement, so. Hopefully we'll make some good, strong progress in that quickly, in the next couple weeks.
So can I ask you, are you moving the second Tuesday in the month communication?
Yeah, I keep messing it up all the time.
Okay,
so I'm sorry.
okay, no, that's okay, I'm just thinking because the second Tuesday will be our board meeting in November.
Oh,
I want to put a footnote that just.
that's okay.
Okay.
Jill and Ginger are super nice about, I text them like 5 minutes before we're supposed to meet and make another plan. They're like super nice at it. And I'm used to it. PTO. Yes, so the PTO, course has this spectacular going on. That's a big news. And another couple of things I wanted to mention. Actually, no, the 501c3 now. That also means that we qualify for Amazon Smile. So any Amazon shoppers in the audience, if you go to smile.amazon.com, smile.amazon.com, before you make your purchases, you can choose hotel as your your organization that you
They
choose
donate
to.
a percentage of your purchases.
Excellent.
We write a blurb
Well,
about
that's
that,
so
I
much,
put
one
that in the
half of
newsletter.
1%. Oh my gosh, I'll give it to my daughter.
I'm not a great.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, it
It's add up.
it adds up. It's
I
something.
do at least $100 a year to where I, because all of the purchases.
Sure. So it definitely adds up. So it's where, and it doesn't hurt you in any way. I mean, it's that's about
Right.
That's a good thing. The spectacular will be the Friday before Halloween,
October 29th at 5:30. I put it in the PTO calendar on
Okay.
Google already.
Okay. 5:30 to 7:30.
5:30 to 7:30.
But the way to do well on the Smile, Amazon.com is to get
Tell
lots of
them
people
all.
on, because,
Yeah.
it's small if it's an individual, but a lot of individuals.
Together. Yeah, I wonder. Christmas is coming. Yeah, I wonder if we made a little card that had a QR code. on it. Link to it somehow. Make it really easy for people to do it themselves. The easier you make it, the more. But yeah, I think it'd be great communications. Something that tells people, go do this. You know, we should have this like digital signups, and they could learn to do the box tops thing, which is another.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time getting into my box tops with the account. I know. Who is it? You need to send in,
I think so.
Michelle, reminders. And I can't get on the app. Every time it doesn't work. Yeah. Because you collect by, all you have to do is scan your receipts. And it will know what you purchased that is box top things. And it automatically puts them in. You have to cut the box tops and collect them. Yeah.
I cut them, put them in a pile someplace. And then they.
you're going, you know exactly where they
Then I throw them away.
Right.
When they're 5 years old.
Right.
Can I just mention one other thing you mentioned with the PTO last time? We're up to Halloween again, not just this spectacular, but Maple Avenue Candy. Sort of needs coordinators.
and it's always a hard job, and we will be reaching out to Donna to help see how she can help maybe use her sign up genius, because she does that. And people can either donate the candy there or something, so I'll see what she says.
It's good to have a place to go.
Right, I mean, there's no guarantee that she'll say, yeah, I'll help you, so I mean. Listening, you may be hearing from me, next week, help coordinate the pickup and distribution of candy. For Halloween.
But as of now, you don't have a place.
No, and as of, no, I'm not in charge of it, and it's, the whole thing is finding someone who can be in charge of it.
So it used, a long time ago, when I first started in Norfolk, it was like, it was a Maple Avenue thing, that was coordinated by
Right.
Maple Avenue. thing.
You're right.
Then, that, those families didn't want to do it anymore, they aged out probably. And so it kind of fell on the PTO, and the PTO started doing it, sort of, but not exactly. We really just sort of donated to it, but because there are only, so many people in Norfolk, all the same people are all the same committees, right? So it got kind of tangled in with the PTO. But we're trying to get it not belong to the PTO, because candy collection is not, it's not exactly, it's not academic, it's not related to the school. We're trying to sort of bring it, send it back to the community, but it's really hard to find a taker. So actually, last year, the fire department folks took care of it, but they don't want to own it either. So we're trying to find.
They got some negative backlash for doing that too, so.
They did, I'm sorry, but, it is difficult. I happen to live on the corner of Maple Avenue in the way.
Would you like to coordinate
Well,
candy?
I'll tell
Thank you for
you, I
volunteering.
buy an enormous amount of candy. I do, because of where I live, I get unbelievable traffic, and not just from Norfolk. I get them from Holbrook, I get them from Canaan, I get them from New Hartford, if you can believe it. Yeah, yeah, right, and so I do. And I don't know if you remember reading, but a couple of years ago, we had 3 little people come in, when I say quite late, near 8 o'clock, and it was sort of after. And one was dressed as a little girl, dressed as a police woman. And do you remember that? This is the cutest, honest to God, it was thing. So we were getting late, and we buy tons and tons, trust me. But my husband was getting concerned that the pile was, and so my husband said, I hate to say this, but would you folks, next week, really, just take 1 candy, 2 at the most, because we want to make sure for the others coming, we have enough. And this little girl opened her bag, and she took out her candy, and she put it in my bowl. And I said, oh, no, you don't have to do that. We'll get it. Oh, no, she said, I don't want any child coming to your house. Not giving to. It was the sweetest thing we ever saw.
That was Natalie, wasn't it?
It was.
Oh,
And I didn't, but Larry gave her, wrote a little article. for
Yeah, we
Norfolk.
celebrated her at a good news gathering.
Yes, because, and she deserved it.
Yeah, she did.
She deserved every bit of it, but they didn't deserve it. So
That's so
you
nice.
see what wonderful children, 4 times. But anyway, I'm happy to get all the candy in my house. I'm only saying because of the way my life is a little turned upside with my grandchild. It's sort of, I don't want to promise something and then not be able to do it, but I'll help you to donate or to do, or to.
Just don't tell me, because I don't want to be in charge of it. We need to find someone who's not on all the committees and all the.
Right, right.
Right.
Well, the fire department is out, you're saying.
Right, well, they prefer to have, they have other things that they're. in
Oh,
charge of
I'm
too,
not
so-
criticizing the fire department, I'm not certainly criticizing the fire department. But, are they looking at you? How about if we did it together?
But it is also Socktober, so
Okay.
So that's
Yes, it is.
for awareness month, so buy your t-shirts at the fire
Oh,
department.
right. What about Jill's last hurrah then? Hey, they're big policies.
All right, well, so thank you
We'll
for
figure it
putting that out
out. We'll
there, yeah.
figure it out somehow.
but if you can, all those within the town of my voice, donate new pairs of warm socks. They're collecting them at Ryan,
Mhm.
at the,
Here,
here,
yes.
and, and Iron Bank,
Is,
yes.
is anybody going to be out purchasing some? So I could give them a check?
You can go to smile.amazon.com.
I ordered them.
Oh.
Lorelai would love that. I'll have Lorelai give you a call. She's in fifth grade. Fifth grade
Yes.
typically kind of
Right.
wrangles this October
Right.
thing, and Lorelai likes to.
You have it from.
I'll have it. Okay.
Just every time I think to be out shopping. And I like to see it and know that I'll take her judgment of what she thinks is appropriate and right.
She'll come, if you want her to, she'll make a little presentation for you.
Here's
Yeah.
$20 was spent.
Here's a cotton blend. She's a very good shopper. She knows how to get to Amazon.
I do, but I'm a bit, I like Amazon for certain things, but I have to know what it is, because I want to see it, feel it, and touch it. Quality is so difficult to get now in this country, excuse me, I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that.
But not with our friends at Smile. That I'm getting punched now. I must be doing those before the other meeting. Let's see.
Yes.
The vocal advisory group has set a meeting for next week, so we'll be meeting.
I set the meeting. Taking my credit.
Are you gonna make a motion before we? We are getting, we're getting punched.
So-
Yes.
Yeah.
So
So-
next Wednesday,
So we'll meet soon and
Then you can.
yes. Yeah, we're excited to meet in person now instead of just on Zoom. So,
Now, what did we find, what was the final thing on the candy?
Oh, that was just looking for someone to take it.
or
We live all the way in South Florida. What you call it?
And you don't
Oh,
know anybody
I
at your
could
house.
use
that.
no.
Yeah, Sona, we live in Sona.
You don't get many people, we get so many.
Why, we could just switch Maple Avenue to Winchester Road and everybody can just trick or treat down there.
Right. Oh, it's too dark on Winchester Road.
All right,
You don't
so
get people.
um,
we don't. No.
we finished our committees. We've had our second reading of tuition policy. We actually have under here to set the tuition rate under new business, but let's table
Hold off
that.
on
So
that. Yeah.
we want to talk about what we learned from other people's tuitions. We're going to push that forward. I don't think we have anything on our consent agenda, so I believe that means that we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Oh my gosh, you're so funny.
That's fine.
Quick, John.
Thank you very much.
Yes, that was excellent.
See you tomorrow.